Hey everyone, Sean Maloney, Digital Business Masters. Welcome to another DBM Strategy Call, midday Mondays, every single week. And we're here just to try and provide, as we've done for many, many years, a very high level overview as to what's going on in the world so that we can basically front run it. So you're always looking to front run. And the way you do that is you follow the money, you own the money, not the currency, the money, and you make sure you put yourself in a place whereby that is being leveraged and gets benefited from global politics, global economics, etc., which is the antithesis, the entire opposite of what it is if you're chasing fiat currencies. So we recognized this years ago, and we've been doing it very successfully ever since. We come from a long background in this industry now, a very, very long pedigree, because back in 2008, we recognized that this is an issue. Ironically now, some of the things that we were fighting against back then, certainly since 2012, which is why we first got into owning the money, was all about unnecessary, and some might even say, to put it politely, mischievous use of the people's value that's manifest as mismanagement of taxation. So fantastic to see that now starting to become front and center, at least in the more public media channels. If you're still listening to legacy media, then obviously that's going to cause challenges in your mindset because you're only listening to what, as it turns out, has been media that's been paid by a lot of this nefarious let's say, I'm trying to put it as politely as possible. Don't know why, but it's not nice to see. Yeah. So we recognized it many, many, many years ago, and the only way we found a way out of that was to own the money, and put ourselves outside of the system as much as we possibly could, and then just follow the wealth transfer. So we did that in gold first of all, very successfully. That brought us in more vehemently into how to do that type of activity on chain. Okay. So Bitcoin and gold back in the day, fantastic. But neither of them, up until very recently, certainly with Bitcoin, provided us any means of necessary cash flow. But we certainly recognized how to protect our purchasing power. So then we started to connect the dots and everything started to come together. We went through the altcoin generations. We went through all the various iterations of digital business, as we now call it, blockchain driven. Gold is part of that now as well. And then we've just expanded from there. So we did that over many, many, many years, proven to be absolutely correct in that decision in terms of a personal point of view and what we've done locally with our own abilities to run a digital business. And then we obviously expanded that with the Academy back in 2020, right in the thick of COVID, actually, because we recognized that people were at home and people found themselves in difficulties for no fault of their own. So from that point, we obviously accelerated, and here we are today, global coverage with over 100 years of combined blockchain experience and hard asset experience, so that we can now empower as many people as possible to get over that first stage, which is to simply get into $1,000 of positive cash flow per month. It's not difficult to do that in this day and age, but what people tend to find is it's challenging from themselves because the mindset and the skills out there. It's not that the model doesn't work. It's not that the systems aren't in place. It's not that the governments and banks of this world are proving there's a problem to us. We've always known there's a problem, and now it's being shown up for what it is. But still, people have this problem of getting themselves on the front foot for all sorts of reasons, mainly mindset driven, I might add. So our job is to support that and educate people on that basis. Okay. Education is what we do. It's nothing to do with advice. We're not interested in financial advice. Anybody over 40 years of age knows that financial advice has just not worked. If you're earning less than $150,000 a year, there's just no way that you're going to get ahead to have enough purchasing power to be able to retire, and to take full advantage of opportunities in life. It's just not going to happen. So the whole point is about taking responsibility and being supported in that process. And that's all we're trying to do on an academy-based business model. Okay, we do that not just talking about it. We're not just here to moan and groan. Stop clocks right twice a day. There's lots of people on the internet, including people we follow, that continually just talk about the problem. They bring clicks in, they bring followers in, they bring subscribers in, they get people clicking bells just because people want to hear about the problem. And it's over and over and over again talking about the problem. We know the bloody problem. What we want is practical things we can do to at least deflect the problem. But really, what you want to be doing is putting yourself so far forward in this life that you can outrun the problem and then help as many other people as possible on the planet do the same. That's the only way it's going to change. Up until recently, possibly. We've said for decades it's a grassroots thing. It moves from people upwards. If you want change, as history has told us many, many thousands of years, if you want change, you have to change it from the bottom up. You're not going to get royalists, you're not going to get politicians, you're not going to get religion changing things to the top down, because power corrupts. So you always end up with people taking advantage of people. If you want true change, you've got to start it from yourself. Otherwise, you will constantly be abused. So what we try to do at DBM is set up a business model that allows people to, yes, see the problem, which we've been talking about today, but then quickly get into action. And that manifests itself in you taking steps towards owning money. And then using that money, again, not currency, money, using that money to create cash flows that then put you in front of the ability to grow and scale. And then once you've got that in momentum, it creates a whole load of things in your life that transcend money. You know, money's just a tool. What you're really looking for is time and experience and energy and the ability to help other people. That's really what it's about. That's real wealth. But money is a way to get there, obviously, which is why we do what we do at DBM and why we love it so much, because we can help so many people now through the internet, power of communication. The model is very simple in which that's structured. It's taken us a long time to try and figure out how to structure the roadmap for people. It starts with mindset, it goes through skills, you get into systems. Only then get into systems. Don't try to drive. You can't buy success. So don't try and throw money at things thinking that'll be done and, job done. It doesn't work like that. You need to put yourself in a place where you've got absolute confidence, control, awareness, sensible patience, to be able to put yourself in a place whereby you grow at what we call a critical mass, and systems do that for us. Yeah. And only when you've got that done will you get into income. It's easy to get flash in a pan income. It's easy to sell things to other people and get a quick commission. What you really want to be doing is driving forward your full understanding of how the operation itself, the system itself, creates the income. And that is not easy. It really isn't. It's why most people don't do it, obviously. Most people work for other people. They have a job. The boss looks after all the challenges of what it is to create value. You're part of a system that does that. That's why you get paid. So you're given the result of the decision, and you're party to it, of course. Without you in that role, the company wouldn't be as good as it is, of course. But at the end of the day, you're waiting for somebody else. Yeah, that's what a wage is. But if you own a job, you're in there 24/7, having to make decisions and make things happen on behalf of the value you're providing as a business to other businesses or other people, right? So there's nothing wrong with either of those two things. But if you're going to come into running a digital business system, then you have to be a big part of understanding your role in making that a success. We also call that tokenomics. So systems, is necessary. Income comes as a result of doing that correctly. And then wealth is just managed income. It's just doing something enough. But what I love about this space is that wealth can be accelerated so quickly once you've mastered the income side on the right systems, because global economics and global macroeconomics and politics makes things happen on your behalf, which you can't really say about any other business model on the planet. Yeah. Banking, possibly. But how many people are at the top levels of banking and how many people are at the top levels of business? Very few people. That's why the blockchain and the internet gives everybody on the planet an opportunity. So this is the structure. You need to be at least in systems these days. You need to be in the hub, and you need to make sure that you're interacting and getting the recordings, and because repetition is the mother of knowledge. All right. So just at the front of these calls, I'd just like to remind people, because going through these next stages I'm going to talk about is very complex. Okay, it can take a lot of absorbing, and it's fast moving. So as if you've got a job, you've got a family, you've got kids to look after, you're never going to keep up with it, right? Not enough to do it justice. Hence we have the hub. Hence we have workspaces. Hence we have things deeper inside the academy that start at the systems level. Okay, and we work hard to keep up with that every single day of the week, so you don't have to. So before I go into the big topics, again, just a reminder, if you're listening to this for the first time, do make sure you understand the difference between currency and money. That's rule number one, step number one, if you like. If you don't understand the difference between currency and money, and you're being drawn into all these shiny objects all over the internet that are trying to sell you this, sell you that, tell you this, tell you that, then you will fail. You will fail. Yeah, you'll just give up because you won't understand why you've done it. The fundamental is to understand that you need to own money. From that, you start the journey of taking some control over what's called purchasing power. And then you can join the movement that's been going on now for many, many, many years, where we're trying to fix the money. Because once you fix the money, you fix the world, right? And I'm delighted to see that certain areas of politics now are starting to help us with that process, because finally they're realizing that things like sovereign wealth funds, etc., are necessary at country level. We just hope they're doing that for the right reasons, yeah? And if they're not, it doesn't really matter to us, because we're doing it as sovereign individuals anyway. We've already proven that. It doesn't matter what bosses, banks, or governments do in the world we're in, because we're already making sure that we run our own sovereign wealth funds in our own households. Think about that. How do we do it? Well, quite simply, like I say, you've always got to put energy, effort, and time into things. That's what it is to be alive. Yeah? That is basics. Rule 101. Yeah? You're just there to make sure that you're out there making a difference in life. Yeah? Those not doing that get despondent, get lethargic, end up in all sorts of mind problems. That's the new backache, right? Everyone's got mindset problems because they're not focused. So we've all got to do that anyway. So if you're going to focus on something and put time every hour, time's most precious commodity, into something, then you may as well put it into something that is most efficient and effective in creating what it is you want. Now, in case you haven't noticed, if you're doing that as an individual running a business, own a job, or you're doing that as an individual working for somebody else, you have a job, it's not efficient. Yeah? You move part of your energy to the right-hand side of the cash flow quadrant, and you start to put things to work for you, systems and money, ideally both. So it's just a case of understanding that a part of your focus every day, and it is every day, doesn't go in just to running a job, having a job and running a business. You try to offset as much as you possibly can into the interconnectivity of other people's energy. And the internet and the blockchain has given every man, woman, and child on the planet access to that. Just in this last few years. Yeah, even e-commerce has only been around for 20 odd years, 25 years. That's a good example of that type of thing. You're interconnecting with access to markets you could only have dreamt of 50 years ago. And everybody can do that on the internet. Everybody. There was no reason for anybody not to be able to do that. And that was Web 2.0. Web 3.0 comes along, and then we start to monetize the internet, and it manifests itself on the blockchain. So all we do at DBM is specialize in helping people turn a certain amount of their energy and focus into allocating assets to cash flow. It's really all it is. It couldn't be more simple. And then you use that cash flow to fund liabilities. No problem with that. We all want to live, have fun, do things, it's all great. That's what life should be about. But if you're chasing liabilities, if you're chasing lifestyle, if you're continually trying to buy liabilities with just yourself, which is normally manifest in a job, and you're doing that on a currency that's purchasing power is falling at 8, 9, 10% a year, then how do you expect to have anything left? So the whole idea is to just flip some of your attention over to things that give you a broader reach. That's really all it's about. Yeah, very, very important slide. And then to take it a stage further, to finish the point, you interconnect all that then. So you move away from where you are currently interconnected as an employed consumer saver. That's a closed loop ecosystem. Yeah, consumerism. Yeah, that's what's been going on since 1971. The whole idea is, yes, okay, there's no choice in there. You have to move in that world. Of course you do. But you can fund that world. You don't buy that world. And you do that by interconnecting yourself into ownership. So you become the owner. You become your own CEO of your own digital business, concentrating on your own balance sheet that then builds because of other things going on in the world that you're connected to. You own lots of businesses. You own lots of velocity of money. You own lots of interface. You own lots of cash flow. And then when you get really good, you're able to use that to build up your own balance sheet so that your own balance sheet funds all that, which allows you then to live off the proceeds for the rest of your days, if you're good. That's the difference between income and wealth. So we co-wrote a book on this back in 2022. It was a business model then called Collaboration over on Amazon. If you're interested, go and read it. We wrote all about this as a business concept, but we were already doing it, right? So we knew that it was something that was relevant, and now it's become normalized. Hence, we talk about it more and more than ever before. Now, how have we normalized it? Well, it's still something that had to be worked on, and it won't stop ever having to be worked on because, you know, we've fought everything from regulation, legislation. We've fought the opinions of three-letter institutions. We've fought the opinions of business and government and institutionalized banking. We've fought them all. We've fought them all. Not fought in the sense that it's been, you know, challenging. It's been more of a, why don't these people understand this? Well, you know, what is wrong with the redistribution of wealth off the back of people owning something that has a continual demand on reduced supply? What is wrong with understanding that? Well, when you get under the hood, you realize that it's not that it's wrong, it's that the hegemony doesn't want it. And then you've got to ask, why don't they want it? And then you can get into all sorts of current affairs, current debates about certain parts of governments not wanting to lift the hood on how things have been spent over the past 50 years. You go down there, they go down that road if you want, but it all leads to the same place. It's all about individuals taking responsibility, right? So part of the responsibility comes in you building a plan. If you haven't got a plan, then you've got nothing. You're just reaching and hoping and jumping around from this, that, and the other. You're being led along probably by some sweet-talking salesperson or some fancy-speaking financial advisor or some sweet-talking, you know, government political person. You're being led along, or by the media, even worse. You're being led along. You've got to step back and say, right, no, what does this look like in the cold light of day? What is this all about, actually? That's why we go back to the money, not currency. We go back to the money. We figure out how to own more of that, then cash flow that, and then put that in a form that allows us to protect purchasing power. And the best way, as it turns out, to do that in the early part of the 21st century is Bitcoin. Gold's there as well, to be fair. Gold does have a part in this, but Bitcoin is by far and away, and proven to be, it's not even an idea anymore. It's proven, it's done. It's an absolute. It's just a matter of time now until more and more countries figure this out for themselves. The institutions have already started to do. But we as individuals front run all that because we're doing it much faster, and there's still loads of time. Yeah, there's still loads of time. Yeah. So get yourself a business plan that starts with equity and just dollar cost average Bitcoin. Then, if you want to maneuver, which is critical, into starting the process where you're going to turn that balance sheet into cash flow, in other words, you're running a P&L, you need to be able to slightly adjust where you're allocating funds so that they create what are called yields. And believe it or not, in this industry, if you're listening to this for the first time, we are now very used to the phenomenon of earning between 5 and 10% plus per month in yield. And best of all, we do that on the US dollar. The equivalent to the US dollar is probably a better way of saying it. And if you understand where the US dollar's headed over the next 5 years, then you'll realize how powerful that is. It's already been powerful for most of the past decade. Now it's getting even more powerful, especially if you live outside of the US. If you live inside the US, it doesn't make much difference. In other words, if you're spending dollars already. But if you live outside of the US, it's very powerful, very, very powerful to be owning, for the first time in human history, the ability to own the US dollar from anywhere in the world in this form. Yeah, I'm not talking about going on your holidays and going to the foreign exchange or, you know, commuting in dollars in Nigeria. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about actually making dollars work for you at high yield. So get that as part of your business plan. And then if you're really clever and you really want to get moving on it and you really understand what it takes, that's the biggest thing, mindset and skill. Huge numbers of people don't understand what it takes to identify the right altcoin opportunities, the right altcoin driven businesses, and then convert that into both equity and yield at the same time. Then you're really off to the races. Be careful with altcoins. Okay. And don't confuse them with memes and all this stuff you'll see these YouTube people talking about. It's all about making sure that you've identified businesses as best you can. It's not easy. That are utilizing digital technologies to create internalized value systems. Think about that green box I showed you earlier on that slide. You own it, you use it, you endorse it. Yeah. It's becoming easier to identify these companies, but it's still challenging. So just be very careful. And if you're already involved with them, those of you who've been working with DBM a bit longer, think about what it takes from your side to have the fortitude and resilience to keep going. Another mistake people make is they defend their own lack of ability and fortitude and mindset by castigating the project. They kick out and blame and get emotional because of their lack of ability to either understand it or finish the job. So you're always better looking in the mirror first before you get involved with anything I'm talking about on this call. Yeah? Mindset, skill, systems, income, wealth. Think about it. So have a business plan and then put it into a model that's already proven and now has a tailwind. A tailwind. It's just a breeze now. Spinnaker's up, we're off. We're off. Again, if you've been in this industry for any length of time, possibly listening to this call live, you'll know what I'm talking about. Been through a lot over the past decade, more than a decade, of having to tack up wind. But here we are now with everything we could ever want, which is what I'm going to talk about next. Because how can we be confident of $250,000 Bitcoin? How were we confident about a $15,000 Bitcoin? How were we confident about a $25,000 Bitcoin? How did we see a $100,000 Bitcoin? How did we know? Well, obviously we didn't know. But all we did was put together the pieces, just like we're doing on this slide. And best of all, as all that time was taking shape, we were reallocating our cash flows back to our balance sheet. And now we just do it all over again and again and again. And we're doing that in an interconnected world, a globally connected world. Think about it. If you're running your own business, which you may well be, and if you've got a job, this doesn't touch you. But if you're running your own business, think about the power of being able to open up a market that's globally connected with 7-8 billion people. Even if 99% of those individuals don't have any clue that that's happening, it's just about to be put into their lives indirectly through bosses, banks, and governments. In fact, it already is. So what if you as an individual sat wherever you are in the world right now was automatically a sovereign owner of that independently on your own, with all this tailwind now with us? What would that look like? And what would it look like if you were able to every single week make decisive decisions that were putting more of that balance sheet back into higher and higher and higher cash flows? And then you knew exactly what you were going to do to reallocate those cash flows and defend those cash flows. Remember, your first job is to get to $1,000 a month of positive cash flow. But it's not just press, done, wait, and live. You've got to constantly expect problems, constantly be tweaking your blockchain factory, constantly looking for machines that will go down, and they will go down. But then your job is to go and help them be fixed again and bring them back in line so you can put everything through that factory just as you were. The bigger your factory, the more machines you've got, the bigger the value adding, that's what they call it. The more margin. The more margin, the bigger you can move forward. You drive your EBITDAs, you're driving your depreciation, you're driving the value of your balance sheet. At the end, the purchasing power that you hope to have, and certainly if you have got any ambition to stop having to work for other people, is to be able to have the most valuable balance sheet you can possibly put your hands on. Isn't that what business is? So that's what this is the blueprint of what that looks like when you put everything together. All right. So all that is important. Okay. I repeat this every single week because without all that structure and awareness and mindset and skill and system connectivity and business planning and awareness in place, none of this, what I'm going to talk about next, makes any sense. But when you do get what I've just been speaking about, and you have this with you as well, especially at the pace that we're operating at the moment, then it makes all the sense in the world. This is what's called front running. So you're ahead of, you're letting the market come to you. You're making decisions as a sovereign individual that affect you directly, instantly. You're not waiting for the drip effects of some government quango or policymaker or some bank decision or a boss or an institution. You're not waiting for that to then trickle. You're actually ahead of that happening. And this is what the DBM strategy calls are all about. It's what they've always been about. It's just finding where to go next. So you're there waiting for it to be manifest, not it coming and then you hoping it becomes manifest in your life. So what's been happening this week? Well, lots. But to try and keep it into a visual that enables us to act, we focus on what we can affect. There's certain key things happened just this week, which is what we're talking about. The big one is this exec order in the US, the biggest economy on the planet, that is now activating, starting to discuss what's called a sovereign wealth fund. Now, we'll go more deeply into sovereign wealth funds in a minute. But what we're looking for as individuals is not the sound bites. As you'll see, a lot of countries have put in sovereign wealth funds, but are they truly affecting the people? Are they empowering the people? That's questionable. Okay, they're necessary, but it's questionable. But it's better than a lot of countries that haven't got any sovereign wealth fund at all. For example, the UK gave away a lot of its opportunities to do this since the 1970s, when it just misspent all the oil reserves of the North Sea. Another country didn't do that, called Norway. And now there are fundamental differences between the confidence and an awareness of the citizens of those two countries in terms of how they live their lives. It's manifest today. You can see it in the way society operates, especially in education and health. But the big deal for us is the very, very high probability now that not just the US, all sorts of pre-election pledges and everything that's gone on that's given us this confidence to see this is happening in real time, but lots of other countries are now watching very closely to align Bitcoin itself into what are called strategic Bitcoin reserves, SBRs, as part of sovereign wealth funds. Remember what I said earlier about front running? Yeah, we've known this for a long time, but it's all been part of an interconnected sort of hobbyist community of people who understand the sound money effect of Bitcoin. Most people have no clue. They just talk about Bitcoin being some spurious, geeky thing you might want to get involved with to make a quick buck. No, it's a fundamental shift in how globally connected internet Web 3.0 technology can help everybody take a position inside strategic Bitcoin reserves. So we watch it closely. The world's largest holder of Bitcoin, as publicized, this is where you've got to be a little bit careful with it, but it doesn't matter right now anyway, is the US at 213,000 Bitcoin. Most of that has been taken away from nefarious activities over the past decade. Yeah, that people do use Bitcoin for, just as they use fiat for. Fiat's used much more than Bitcoin in nefarious activities. The next biggest is China. Obviously, just like their gold reserves, very difficult to know what they actually own, but the estimate is 190,000 Bitcoin. And believe it or not, the UK is the third largest owner of Bitcoin on the planet, 61,000 Bitcoin. Now, what these countries, especially the US, which is great to see, because for years and years and years, the US was in the doldrums when it came to this technology, but it's been shaken out because the right people are now in charge. Yeah? Whatever you think of the individuals, whatever you think of the personalities, the businessmen are in charge. You need businessmen in charge, at least to get the thing straight. Not career politicians and accountants and lawyers. You need people who know what they're doing in terms of making things efficient, cost effective, and most of all, that drive the energy of their people into highest return for their people. So the US is driving the charge, and the probabilities of Bitcoin now entering this sphere whereby you've got sovereign wealth funds designed of the people for the people, supposedly, is what we're watching for. And even if the sovereign wealth funds that these guys bring out isn't doing what it should, we'll take a look at some examples in a minute, it doesn't matter for us because we own Bitcoin. Bitcoin can be owned directly within seconds. And all we do then, as we've done for years, is hold it and reallocate it. Now, we did a very similar thing with gold over the past 10 years. We added gold to the mix because we understand that gold has done this for 5,000 years. So you don't need to reinvent the wheel. If you've not heard the story of the toga and the suit, then go and speak to your DBM coach and they'll tell you the story of the toga and the suit. It's not very difficult to understand the need for sound money. Bitcoin is just gold on steroids. It moves at the speed of light. So we'll have a look at some gold analysis in a minute because gold just this week hit another all-time high. The reasons for that is what's called flight to safety. Just like we watched happen back in 2008 and 9, but didn't understand it. And just like we've watched over 4 or 5 different quantitative easing experiments over the past decade when we did understand it. In the end, it all just boils down to dollar cost averaging gold, just as your dollar cost average Bitcoin. That simple. That revolution in societal funding is one to watch. That's more of a macroeconomic debate. It's very, very unproven. Having said that, up until 1913, it was absolutely proven that the main thrust of taxation coming into most of the wealthy countries of the world was driven by tariffs. So as they imported goods, they put taxes through tariffs, and that gave revenue to the country, so they didn't have to put the burden of taxation onto their own citizens. That shifted into that in 1913 dramatically, and it significantly shifted again in 1971. most of our lifetimes has been all about trying to get ahead while we're still paying out 40-45% of our energy every single year to putting currency, devaluing currency, I might add, back into the hands of central governments. That is starting to shift out again. It's too early to say where it's going to go. Way too early. But it doesn't really matter for us. Again, as sovereign individuals who understand the problem, we recognize the value of having Bitcoin national reserves, replacing fiat currency treasuries. If you've heard over the weekend, even in the US, they're talking about some of the treasuries being fraudulent already. He's even talking about most of the treasuries that exist in that country in the US having such an effect of fraudulent nature that it could even reduce the government debt straight away. Reduce. If you understand what's going on in a wider scope in terms of currency wars with that particular statement, then you'll know what's happening with revaluation of currencies. That's what all that's connected to. Okay, and we're also involved with that. So if you're over in the hub, you'll already be involved with us being well ahead of currency revaluations, which are now being driven off the back of some of these taxation policy changes. Okay, we're clearing the swamp basically. So which of these is best for the countries? Well, I think we already know that, but it doesn't matter to us, as we've said for years, ever since 2008, when we recognised they were not going to change. The top down, the governments, and it's being proven even more in 2025, they're not, it's not that they won't even change, they won't do it freely. They're fighting. They're fighting, they're screaming and shouting about the change. What have they got to hide? What's wrong with auditing and making businesses more efficient, or government initiatives more efficient? All businesses at the end of the day. What have they got to hide? Well, all it does is vindicate what we've been doing for years. If they're at the point where they're screaming and shouting, that means there's something wrong. If they're more bothered about the action of the audit than they are of what the audit will uncover, then you know what you're dealing with. And that's why we've always said, from bosses, banks, and governments, are they either complicit or ignorant? Either way, it doesn't matter which they are. As long as you own the money, you're in safer water. So, with all that said, there's been some activity going on around these sovereign wealth funds. So it was worth a review. So we did a bit of a review on what these sovereign wealth funds look like. We've known about it for a long time. I'm based in the UK, and I remember back all the way back, as long as I was old enough to understand it. Found North Sea oil in the UK back in the 70s, and it's billions of gallons. Yeah, and the UK, in case you don't know, just spent that frivolously. Most of it's gone offshore, and it's gone into the hands of a very few wealthy people, right? Just as you'd expect from the UK. But at the end of the day, other countries have done it in a very different way. What's happened has happened. It doesn't really matter. But once you understand as an individual, the first thing you do is take control of where you can affect. And because of the fortunate nature of being interconnected on the internet with a blockchain technology wrapped around us that manifests itself as Bitcoin, and then you realize the impetus of large countries and big countries already now moving towards Bitcoin wealth funds, we get directly affected by that as individuals. So we don't need to wait for our governments and our bosses and banks to get rid of ignorance or complicity. The fact that we are all connected as individuals anyway means that we can do what we do, and that's why Bitcoin's worth over $100,000 today. And it's a very, very likely part of why Bitcoin will hit $250,000 in not too distant future. So what are these countries doing? Well, sovereign wealth funds, as you might expect, run properly, are just the same as what we do as individuals when we do our own triple lock. So they own assets, they create growth and wealth with those assets, and arguably, they redistribute. Now, a lot of countries do with this already. The UAE is a very good example of a country that does this. Norway is a good example of a country that does this. They create societal purchasing power. It manifests in better education, better healthcare, cleaner streets, safer streets, less conflict between who pays taxes, who doesn't pay taxes. You haven't got tractors driving through the center of Dubai. You've got tractors driving through the center of London right now as I'm talking to you. Because, as ever, unimaginative, broke governments run by lawyers have no business instinct on what it is other than to print more currency and tax every single side facet they can get their hands on, including students and farmers. That manifests as more and more people being broke. Therefore, the country starts to implode because it can't sustain its own purchasing power. So they export the production of value, and that just has a knock-on effect. And then there's exporting countries cut off gas lines, have wars with each other, place tariffs, and that just puts the country into more and more despondency. Doesn't matter who you vote for. This isn't political, by the way. This is apolitical. Doesn't matter whether it's blue, red, purple, green, or whatever. They're all the same, right? And it's only going to change when the people change. If you're really that bothered, then you go off there and you start to make an effect at political levels, if you've got the balls for it. Big balls. But at our level, to create this type of effect in our own lives first, so we can then, if we choose, get out there and make a difference on a societal level. Because of the nature of Bitcoin, it brings in an ability for people to start to get their own house in order more quickly. And that's really what this next phase is all about over this next 5 years. So it's a wordy slide because I'll keep coming back to it over and over and over again. There's a research here. You have to see what these sovereign wealth funds are all about, and then you have to get in front of it, let the market come to you by seeing where Bitcoin is already playing its part in this. That manifests itself, sorry about the edit there, in El Salvador. So if you've not been tracking what El Salvador's been doing over the past 4 or 5 years, then you need to. You need to go and track how El Salvador uses internal power. Now, El Salvador is a tiny little country in Central America. So, it is what it is, but it doesn't matter because it's set the model. It's set the model, and there's other places doing it now quite quickly. But most of all eyes are on the US. Because if the US does this, which they will, then all the other countries will follow. And that is a massive accelerator towards $250,000 Bitcoin. In fact, that's an accelerator towards $1 million Bitcoin. And on and on and on, because of the nature of Bitcoin's economics. So you can just cast your eye on this. You can see where these countries are. Norway's the most pure form of this, in my opinion. UAE, okay, then you've got the Saudis, and China, obviously a bit more difficult to understand. Singapore, okay, just a very good example of how they do sovereign wealth funds. Just notice Saudi Arabia, though, how they're changing the game even before Bitcoin lands with them by investing heavily in tech and sports. If you saw the blueprint that DBM has in terms of all the sectors we're in, you'll see that high tech and AI and sports are very much part of what we do. What the Saudis are doing is part of the reason for that. So it's not just about Bitcoin, it's about all the other ways that you can get yourself in front. You can front run. Just like people say, oh, I wish I'd have front run Amazon. I wish I'd have front run Apple. I wish I'd have front run Facebook. I wish I'd have front run Uber. No, you can't wish you'd have front run it. You have to see where things are going once you've had the experience of wishing that you'd front run. Then you look for the next things. That's what we're doing here. We're looking for strategic front running. Right? So sovereign wealth funds are a big part of where we're headed. Big part of where we're headed. When I say we, I'm talking predominantly about Bitcoin. So keep an eye on that. And then last but not least, it's just understanding the backstop. So history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. Yeah, you'll have heard us say that before many times. And this is where the convergence between gold and Bitcoin lives. And it's clever because it's so layered. It is so deep. Yeah, when we were first talking about Bitcoin and got into gold, and it was okay. So we can see gold doing what it's doing. This is a chart. The chart don't need to worry too much about not being able to see the charts. They're just guidance. But at the end of the day, Bitcoin and gold moving at the pace they've moved over this past couple of years isn't an accident, right? It's called flight to safety. That's the main driver behind it. So the more that the central banks maneuver, particularly towards gold, so these blue lines on this chart here are the purchasing of gold since 2008. 2008, ring any bells? So we knew about this very, very, very early on here, right? And we offset it against what we could see was happening prior to 2008. And then we said, well, hang on, what if it's good enough for the central banks, it's good enough for us. So what the bottom line is that is happening now with Bitcoin. And again, it's like being aware of what would happen with gold back in 2007, which is virtually impossible, right, for ordinary people. The big guys understand it, but the ordinary people don't. But with Bitcoin, we do, because we're so entrenched in understanding the purpose of Bitcoin in its purest form. And now all we do is track the money across. Okay, now there's a couple of warnings that you need to understand when deploying this strategy. But the net result of it is a much safer place, in my opinion, than we ever have with gold. And not in our lifetimes will we get where we need to do with gold price, right? The reason gold price is so suppressed, despite $6 trillion of inflows over the past 8 months, 44% increase in gold inflows going into central banks in the past 8 months. Despite that, gold is barely touching $3,000 an ounce. Now, $3,000 an ounce is a huge benefit, a huge increase on where we were, especially if you've been owning Bitcoin over the past decade, gold over the past decade. But if you understand the M1 economics around what the true value of gold should be, so if we revalued all global debt and put it back to pre-1971 standard, you'd be at a much, much, much higher level of gold per ounce value in dollars. A lot, I'm talking a lot, right? Now, we've known this for many, many years, and we've been vindicated because that's exactly what's happened to our gold. It's just continually going up. Well, it would do because they keep printing more currency. So it's not that the gold is necessarily up, it's that they're printing more currency that gives it a higher need of more currency to buy the same ounce. Yeah, toga in the suit. But the deeper layer below that is much more profound. Much, much more profound. And this is where it can shake out. And it's what you have to be careful of when you're dealing with Bitcoin as we move into industrialized Bitcoin, institutionalized Bitcoin. And they're called ETFs. All right. The paper money supply, the paper contracts that exist around every ounce of gold means that there's broadly around 250 on latest estimates, paper contract, ETFs, under claim for every 1 ounce of gold. So keep that in mind, because what's been happening with Bitcoin over the past 6 months when it comes to the institutions, are there such a thing now as Bitcoin ETFs? So it's the adage again, if you don't hold it, you don't own it. The question this time around in this next 10-year cycle is, okay, this is where the $250,000 Bitcoin comes from, fundamentally. Okay, so if we do have a situation where the Bitcoin ETFs are buying up Bitcoin for fun, which they are absolutely massively, just like gold, yeah, right now, the exchanges are draining fast. 100,000 Bitcoin per month or 3,500 Bitcoin per day are being taken off the exchanges as we speak right now. And there's only 450 Bitcoin mined per day. And a big number of that are going into the ETFs. In other words, it's contract-based Bitcoin. Now, in the short term, that gives us a huge benefit because that's just going to suck up supply and drive the price of Bitcoin up on top of sovereign wealth funds, on top of everything else that's already been going on. So we're going to see price discovery, front run it. Yeah, this is why you need to dollar cost average Bitcoin. And then as it pops out the other side of that, then we have to question, can and will Bitcoin be co-opted as much as gold has over the past 50 years? Now, the ease of self-custody with Bitcoin suggests not. There's only one country on the planet that's ever confiscated physical gold off its citizens. No prizes for guessing which country that was. Bitcoin's a whole different animal. A whole different animal. So there's a lot of reasons why, even at the other side of the ETF cycle, you're not going to see a co-opted control on Bitcoin's price. But for many of us at this level, working at DBM for the past decade and going forward, because you've accumulated Bitcoin already, it's in your custodianship. So you're going to take advantage of that short-term pump. And if you know what you're doing to reallocate that balance sheet, you'll live the rest of your days. So we expect the real price of Bitcoin to start to take shape towards the end of this decade. The question for you is, how much are you going to build up in the meantime to re-leverage? We do a lot of collateralization on this in the academy to take advantage in any case, so you don't get cornered if it is the case that Bitcoin gets co-opted, which I don't think is likely. I'm just letting you know that this is a consideration. Yeah. So these are deep dives into tailwinds. Yeah. And when you know this stuff, just like we did with gold and Bitcoin early on, you're able to drive your life changes and life opportunities much faster because you're aware of what's going on in the bigger picture. So hopefully this is useful. So just to remind you, it's not just about owning the Bitcoin. It's about having the Bitcoin build your balance sheet for leverage and collateral so that you can drive that into cash flows and then push that back round again to own Bitcoin more quickly. And as Bitcoin goes up from 100 to 150 to 200, 250, 500,000, it just gives you more and more and more headroom on which to make that happen more quickly. And as we get into more and more confidence about how to leverage into all these industries to create cash flows, then basically you've set yourself up. Yeah, that's how it basically works. That's a business plan. And if you want help and guidance in how we do this every day of the week, then you need to be putting yourself into the right places. So work with people who've got what you want and can prove it. Very few people can do this because one, they've not understood it yet, and two, it takes a huge amount of effort and fortitude, just like getting fit. So work with the Academy if that's what you want to accelerate it forward. Hopefully this was useful. Any questions, pop them in the channels, and we'll see you on the next call.